and welcome to the BPD Bunch. We have a panel of people who are in functional recovery from borderline personality disorder, and each week a few of us get together to discuss the ups and downs of our BPD journeys to give you hope and direction for your own. I'm your host, Xannie, and today I am here with Mo, Solène, Jay, and Melanie. Where in the world is everyone coming from today?
I'm from Central Ohio in the U.S.
Coming from Dubai, UAE.
From Calgary, Canada.
Toronto, Canada.
And I am coming from New Mexico in the U.S. Today we're going to talk about validation and validation-seeking behavior. Melanie is a psychology master's student and is currently working to qualify to become a psychotherapist. She'll be working with clients soon. So Melanie, could you give us a quick definition of validation?
Jill Rathis and Alec Miller, who worked with the DBT founder, Marsha Linehan, define validation as validation communicates to another person that his or her feelings, thoughts, and actions make sense and are understandable to you in a particular situation. And to add a couple more terms, self-validation involves perceiving your own feelings, thoughts, and actions as making sense, accurate and acceptable in a particular situation. And invalidation communicates intentionally or not through words and actions that another person's feelings, thoughts, and actions in a particular situation make no sense and are not worthy of your time, interest, or respect.
When you hear the term validation seeking, what's sort of the first thing that comes to mind?
For me, it's approval. When I was really struggling with this, I needed the approval of others without any regard for my own morals or my own happiness or fulfillment.
Yeah, I would say it's putting your worth in the hands of other people.
I would see it as giving somebody else the power to dictate how I feel on any given day, actually, about myself and about a situation.
Another word to add is dependence. Constant dependence, like feeling that I'm clinging and I'm reaching and I'm needing.
My therapist used to talk about reassurance as a synonym for validation seeking to help me differentiate between validation and validation seeking. So because when you use the same terminology, it can be quite confusing. And actually, everybody needs a validation. We need a validation that we're part of a group, that we belong, that we have the right to be here. So I thought that was really helpful to have that reassurance as like a synonym or another way to refer to validation seeking.
Yeah, it's interesting because you brought up the human aspect of needing validation and seeking validation. And I think I have a similar reaction to validation seeking that I do when I hear people say attention seeking. Because it always feels like it's used as, I don't need to pay attention to you because it's just this. You're just looking for something. And it's like, why is that a problem? You know, maybe the way I'm asking for it is a problem, but the fact that I'm looking for it is totally a normal human thing. But I always think it's funny when people like comment something about like, and they put it on the internet to get attention. It's like, well, I didn't just put it here for no one to look at it. Like, of course it's for attention.
And the person's probably commenting on it for attention.
I know.
I think that's the key. The why is somebody doing what they're doing? And being able to differentiate throughout the years for myself and checking in as to why, what's the motive? But if somebody's seeking for support, maybe they're just there and they're crying for, clinging for, and they're asking for, hey, look at me. Sometimes they need to know why they're doing what they're doing, and it gives them that answer.
Since we sort of talked about what does validation seeking mean to you, what does validation seeking look like for you?
In my mind, validation seeking looks like a well, and it keeps getting filled up and filled up and filled up, but it's never full. It's not even half full because there's a leak somewhere. So it looks like putting my confidence and worth in other people's hands, like, you know, for example, at work, you might get some feedback about your performance, and then I will hold on to that and I will be like, I need to fix it. And I will seek that reassurance from so many people around me to say, you know, am I okay? Are they real? Is this real? And yeah, it's then listening to all these different opinions and feeling like, what are they saying? Are people listening? Do they not care? Do they think I'm boring? So it's that constant internal voice that is constantly like questioning and looking for that craving, that fill up of that validation. And then it's really a place of extreme vulnerability, and it's led me to truly, like, so many times lose myself, hide my pain, think that I needed to try harder to be perfect, be the perfect student, be the perfect girlfriend, be the perfect this, the perfect that. And people have sometimes told me, and this is still really hard for me to think about, but that they couldn't sense, like, who am I, like, who is the authentic version of me. And I think it's because I spent so much time trying to seek that validation, trying to adapt to whatever seemed to resonate with people, that then it came to a point where it was like, well, who are you actually? And I'm like, I don't know.
When I'm thinking about what validation seeking looks like for me, I'm thinking primarily of how it manifests in dysfunctional ways. I feel like validation seeking for me is very much like one of those internal car alarms when your car is trying to tell you something. If you don't respond to it immediately, it just gets louder and louder and louder. That is a great way to sum up a lot of my validation seeking behavior. And it's funny because it's not as if people didn't try to console me or help me when I was upset, but they weren't able to validate me in the way that I needed them to. And so over the course of particularly my adolescence, I really learned to be very unpleasant and very loud, almost demanding validation from people, because it was the only way that I could get them to react in a way that was big enough that it felt like it meant something. To be more specific in like what that looks like for behavior, I think validation seeking for me is largely manifests in an inability to tolerate criticism. I show people like something I've done, and I'll convince myself that that I want someone's feedback or help or whatever, but that's not true. I actually want them to validate me. I want them to tell me that what I did was worthwhile and good, and that I am worthwhile and good. And if they give me any criticism at all, I crumble because I put my worth in their opinion of what I'm doing. And I think that's what's so interesting about validation seeking for me, is that it comes from such a vulnerable place, but I can come across as so aggressive and self-absorbed because I can't handle when somebody gives me a negative feedback. And it isn't because I think I'm so amazing, but because my sense of worth is dependent on what that other person thinks of me.
So for me, if I did something that I thought was right for me or something that just made me happy, I needed other people's approval and acceptance of that for me to really like feel like I was on the right path. And if I felt like I didn't get that approval or acceptance from other people, then I would have to change. And then I would cling to whatever I think that they think is the right way and the good way. And so then by the time I was done with all of it, I just ended up feeling out of place and just like I was in the wrong spot and I was making the wrong choices. So it just didn't feel good. So when I'm at the unhealthy level of seeking validation, that's what I do. I need to make sure that the thing that makes me feel like I'm making the right choice is accepted by other people.
It's difficult for me. Like, as I was listening to everyone, I honestly, the only word that kept coming to my mind was life. Like, it feels like, unfortunately, that is a bit my life. I think what that looks like for me is when I cannot trust my own actions, period, at all, and I'm constantly gaslighting myself. And for me, I guess gaslighting means to constantly doubt myself and to not trust the things that I think, feel, or decide about anything to do with myself and my life. And unfortunately, that kind of tends to go hand in hand with my experiences of seeking validation. And it's kind of a point where, I don't know, it can get really dangerous. It's almost like I don't really know what's going on around me. I don't trust anything. And it can get, I don't know if anyone else will identify with this, but it feels like a spiral to me. You go down real fast when you get on that, because I find it starts to then affect so many different layers of my life, especially interpersonal relationships, because I'm expecting something from people, I'm not getting it, therefore it makes it easier for me to feel that they're hating on me, you know?
I was very invalidated at school around being bullied for my weight, my appearance, and also the way that I, showed up with my neurodiversity and all these other things. And recently I signed up for a pageant. And I was like, yeah, I'm just going to do this fun thing. It's going to be random, blah, blah, blah. It's my ADHD brain. It's an adventure. And that's the mindset that I had. That's the mindset that I thought I was, walking in, everything, blah, blah, blah. We start the day. It's amazing. It's all like glitter and there's a stage. And, the child in me, the little girl in me is like, I get to be girly. Like I never really grew up and had this opportunity. And I'm walking on the stage and I'm loving it. It's so amazing. And then we have the break and my parents came, my husband is there. We're having champagne. I'm like so happy. I'm literally on cloud nine. I had the best of my life. And then we come back for the results. And then they give out these different awards. And I'm counting how many people, how many awards. I'm like, okay, I have one chance in, it was high, come on. There's a part of me, and especially that little girl in me that's like, yeah, I entered a safe thing, right? This is going to work out. And then I get nothing. And that moment, and it's recent, it's just a couple of months ago, made me realize that I wasn't where I thought I was in terms of being able to self-validate because, and it still makes me emotional right now, honestly, I was in pieces. I thought I was humiliated and I could not stop crying. And it wasn't this version of me, it was the little girl version of me. And she was like, I have worked out so much. I've lost so much weight. I've done so many different things. It's still like, I'm still not good enough. I'm still not pretty enough. I'm still not inspiring enough. Like, when is it ever going to be enough? And maybe I should just stay in bed and never come out again. And it was really confronting, to just realize, whoa, I'm still in desperate need of seeking that appreciation and validation. Like, how do I make real progress on that? And that's been my focus and is my focus this year, that self-compassion, self-care, more you talked about it, that piece, because damn, it's hard.
Thank you for sharing that, because there's moments where we go, what's the motive? I didn't even know it was so deeply, subconsciously still ingrained in me, where I didn't know why I needed that and I didn't get it. And throughout the years, I beat myself up with that negative self-talk. You're so this, you're so that. It's where we actually go, you know what? I need love. But how do I, like you said, Solène, self-validate? How do I realize my motives may be off because I need it from others and I'm not giving it to myself? How do I give it to myself? And so I think your story is beautiful because it woke you up.
And I think it was a gift that I didn't receive any recognition because the lesson was there. The lesson was,
ding dong.
Hey, But I only see it, after a few days. I needed to be in the pit of despair and, let myself as well feel all the feelings. Because like you said, we've been invalidated so much for those strong emotions, at least for sure the both of us on this call. You have to hold your own hand,
So how do you manage the urge to engage in validation-seeking behavior in a more effective way?
I've had to learn to place value and worth on being myself. So, because for so long, a big thing was I have to be special. I have to be different. I have to stand out. But now I speak about this with my husband. I'm not comparing myself to anyone. I'm comparing myself to my own ideal state. Instead of being jealous and envious, I use people as role models to change. So, for example, I might feel like I have to really constantly compete with other people and get attention and this, but that's not important. So at that point, I stop, I observe, I notice, what is it saying to me? Why do I feel at that moment that that's a need or an urge, right? Instead, I notice, what is it that person's doing great? So I separate, and I make a notice, I write down, that's awesome. I approach with curiosity, get mindful in my body, I sit. So in that moment, because the urges come. It's not always the best to act in that moment. You have to observe, sit, take some breaths, maybe write down, and then you can come back to it and think of the action step to take with it, if that makes sense.
My way of managing that urge to always seek validation from other people is, for one, I get off of social media, or I at least just take a break. I find that I get stuck into this pit of, I compare myself to a lot of people on social media, which is, I know it's like logically anyone can kind of exaggerate about the life they have or whatever. Well, you don't see the person's full story on social media. So I have to remind myself of that when I find myself comparing my life to the life I see of other people on social media. So that's the main one. Once I stop comparing myself to other people, I'm not so desperate to get validation from the world. Another thing is I have low self-esteem, so it's hard for me to think of a lot of things that I like about myself, but there are a few things. And so I try to remind myself of the things that I'm proud of for myself and my own accomplishments and stuff. And I focus on that. And I kind of just lay low until I'm steady again with being obsessive about seeking approval from everyone else. So yeah, just I guess just remembering that everyone has a story, everyone has a struggle of how they got to where they are. So comparing myself to them is not really useful or helpful in any way.
The demons of comparison. I
I
can
know,
so relate to
right?
that.
It's wild.
Yes,
Yeah.
same. It's so wild, especially on social media, just like you said. You know, I'll be scrolling, I'll be like, look, everybody's living their best life. So you have to take I have to take a break from that for sure. For me, it might sound a bit strange at first, but hear me out. I first validate the need for validation. So I remind myself that every single human being needs validation to feel that sense of belonging and to feel that they're worthy and loved. So the fact that I'm seeking or feel like I am about to seek validation, that is totally valid. And it's okay to feel this way. And then it opens the questions as well, you know, along the same lines of, you know, where is this coming from? You know, where is this need for validation coming from? And where might I be able to give it to myself or get it from, you know, somewhere else, or even distract myself from it. So there are different avenues then that open up. And I also, it was my therapist, towards the end of therapy, she said to me, you're doing really well. There's just one thing. Of course, seeking validation is one thing. What is the thing? What is the one thing that I'm not perfect? Oh my God. And that was non-judgmentally. So I tend to judge, especially myself, very, very harshly. It's never good enough for me, but it's only about me. Everybody is amazing, but me, oh my goodness, you know, there's this other standard that I can never reach. And she was like, you're to the point where you're judging your judgments, basically. You're noticing it, and then you're going like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm judging myself. How am I still judging myself? And it's like this vicious cycle. So instead, now I remind myself, don't judge your judgments. Just notice the voice, notice what the voice is saying about you, that, you know, you're not this, you're not that, you're to this, you're to that, and all of that. And just notice it, don't judge it. It's there. It's okay. It's there. And then the third thing, and it's really moving into that self-compassion and self-care. So, is how can I honor myself? How can I fuel that void back to the well, the image of the well? You know, how can I give myself and replenish this water for myself? And maybe it's just making myself my favorite drink, or maybe it's going for a walk or going for a swim. And when I do these things, I then use gratitude cup, because when, for example, I'm swimming, I'll be like, I can't believe I'm so lucky that I get to swim right now. And, you know, it's winter all over the world and I get to live in this place where I can swim right now. How good is this? So expressing that gratitude helps.
The biggest thing for me is to ask myself, is this effective? Because there's a lot of times where I reach out to people for validation or help because it's sort of, there's sort of the two sides, right? Sometimes, depending on the person, there are people who I view sort of as like saving me, and then the people I need to save, right? Sometimes overly go to them for their opinion or their support, and I have to be cautious because there are some people who I like just genuinely appreciate that they are skilled in an area in which I'm not. And then there are some people who I go to for their opinion when I really don't need to be doing that. And so asking myself, is this effective? And also, is this the right person? That's really important. And then on the flip side, when I am engaging in the sort of the validation seeking of like myself as the savior, asking myself, is this effective, is really important, because I have a tendency to become over involved in the lives of people who are really not in my friend group. And I spend an exorbitant amount of time trying to help them with their problems at the cost of ignoring my own family, ignoring my own work. And so I have to be really aware of that, and where it is appropriate, set boundaries with people so that I'm not just jumping on helping them whenever I get a request just because it makes me feel like I'm valued.
How closely linked is people pleasing and saying no to this seeking behavior, and learning this, I can say no, and learning throughout the years, I can say no, and that's so uncomfortable.
Yeah, when I think about the way that I try to manage this urge, I think I have to disengage with whatever is bringing the urge out of me. I'm not going to lie, that's a really difficult thing to do when I'm in the kind of frame of mind that tends to go hand in hand with excessive validation seeking, and it sometimes is not something I can do. But what I try to do is put a pause on things. So if the thing that I'm seeking validation on is specifically related to my work, academics, etc., I tend to communicate with people through email. I'm happy writing something, I'm happy feeling my feelings, I will not hit send, because I need to come back to that in a week when I've moved past this, or I need to go through it with somebody else, or I need to look at it with my therapist or whatever. And now those kinds of things are really quite instinctive for me. They're my kind of go-tos, and they're the things that happen almost instantaneously. If I'm seeking validation, I think in like interpersonal contexts with friends, I think I try to do things on my own and put my phone away. I will go walking. I will do things that sort of indirectly indicate to myself that I actually don't need that. I'm doing enough on my own. I'm quite okay where I am, and it will pass. And I'm not going to wind my friends up, although they will probably tell me to shut up if I said that, because they will not perceive it as me winding them up. But we all have limits, right? And, we're all going through things. All my friends are PhD students as well. We're all tired. I don't want to be the straw that breaks the camel's back, and I'd rather go to them when I genuinely need it and not when I clearly know that there's something else going on. So I tend to take myself out of it entirely.
People will often say like there are no stupid questions, and I heard a teacher once say that that's not true. The stupid questions are the ones that show you didn't do any effort of your own to solve it first. You have to be careful of the context of that, because sometimes you don't know for what to look for. But I think I take that a little bit when I'm going to ask people questions. It's like, have I actually done anything to try to figure this out myself, to give myself a sense of competence before I'm going to somebody else? Not because I expect like my friends are going to be like, that's a dumb question, you're not showing to me you did, but just because for my own sense of self-worth, I want to know that I'm not just expecting other people to solve my problems, and I'm demonstrating that I am able to, make some forward motion on myself. And also, I don't want to be wasting people's time either. Like, if it is something I can solve on my own, that's the other thing. Like, a lot of times the unknown scares me because I can't picture what is there. And I'm like, how do I deal with that if I don't know what's there? As an example, I kept waiting for my husband or my brother to help me change the tires on a car. And my brother ended up helping me with it. But once we did it, I was like, I didn't think I could do this by myself. Like, this is, at least for that particular model, it was not a particularly complicated thing. But I just didn't know what it looked like. And so instead of just looking it up to see how hard it might be, I just assumed I wasn't going to be able to do it and relied on someone else to help me.
Can't remember exactly where I heard this, so I'm sure I'm stealing it from somewhere. It's from courage comes competence, from competence comes confidence. And that's really just an interesting kind of channel of events there that you illustrated perfectly with this story, I think.
You know, it's interesting you're talking about showing up as your real self being kind of the antidote. I think that's true. And it is, in my experience, more painful. And the trade-off for me is this, like, in the past, when I have shown up artificially aggressively to try to control my environment so that I feel protected, it made me more miserable in the long run. When I show up as myself and I'm doing my best to be my authentic self and people still react negatively, that hurts so much more. But it hurts more for less time. It has fewer long-term negative consequences. It can be so painful in the short term when you show up as yourself and people still don't like you or have some sort of negative reaction, because then, for me anyway, I always feel hopeless. Like, I did everything I could to really be honest and stick to my values, and it wasn't enough. And I think that's where being able to self-validate is such an important tool, not only in that context, but in this whole conversation in general. As social animals, we do need validation from others, and we're not always going to get it. And when we don't, the only option really left to us is, well, there's other options. We can stay miserable, right? What I choose to do, what I hope I get myself to do, is to self-validate. So what are some of the ways that you all self-validate?
I feel like I'm just at the beginning of my self-validation journey, to be honest. It was the theme that I set for 2023, so it's been a big focus of mine, looking at self-compassion, self-acceptance, and eventually ... self-love. And so I started doing things like journaling about it, reflecting, and things like that. So it's slowly helping. Some of the more concrete things is I will remind myself that I'm only human. I'm doing the best that I can. And that there's a difference between what I do and who I am. So when I start to feel like I'm a failure, I'll go, hang on a minute, maybe I did something wrong. It doesn't mean that I'm wrong, like as a human being holistically. So it'll be like challenging that negative self-talk. And the very, very beginning of how I really started on this like exploration of these topics was a little mantra that I wrote and I wanted to share with you all. It goes like this: may I be happy and free. May I be safe and healthy. May I believe in me. May I shine brightly. May I learn to just be me.
I love that, Solène. And to kind of piggyback what you were speaking about, validating not just what my thoughts are saying, but understanding in the moment what I need and being present for myself and fully aware every moment. I'm doing this week body scan meditation with this guy, John Kabat-Zinn, and you have to sit, lie down. You try to for 30 minutes, and he talks his way through every part of your body. And in the first 5 minutes, I was crying. Literally tears were coming because there were so many thoughts, terrible thoughts coming through. So I'm actively listening and they're so loud. But eventually 15 minutes through, they started kind of dissipating and just going away. And I started to realize that for me, self-validating isn't just listening to the emotion. It's listening to every single thing moment by moment that I need.
Well, I think there's a lot of value in just accepting yourself wherever you are in life, and also accepting the fact that not everyone is going to accept you, because that's something we all just have to live with. I think that's like the takeaway for me. I am who I am, I'm always willing to change, if there's bad habits or whatever, but I am who I am. I feel how I feel. And some people don't like that. But oh, well, what can you do? You can't please everyone. That's how I self-validate myself and stay focused on what's important.
Since my manifestation of BPD was so external for so long, so much lashing out, that my first priority for most of my recovery was just to become someone that other people could stand to be around. But then I went too far in that direction, to the point where I was constantly invalidating myself and judging myself and judging the judgments and being like, oh my gosh, I'm being so judgmental. Wow, what's wrong with you? You're so judgy, and one of the things that was really important was differentiating between validation of emotion and approval of behavior. Depending on the behavior, sometimes whether it's like okay or not is a matter of opinion. I would get really stuck on whether my behavior was acceptable or not. And I would use that sometimes as a way to invalidate myself. Like, I made a mistake, therefore I don't deserve to have some sort of emotional reaction. And so separating those things out and recognizing that validation is really more about the emotional experience than the action, and saying to myself, given all the things that have happened to me, or given this situation, or given that I'm sensitive, it makes sense that I'm feeling this way. I'm not going beyond that, not using that to justify ineffective behavior, but just to say this emotion makes sense. Because if you deny that your emotions even exist, you can't deal with them. You have to accept that they're there. I've spent so much time just being like, that's a dumb emotion, go away. Giving myself compassion and saying, it makes sense that I'm feeling this, allows me to then do something with that.
I think what's really important for me is context, right? So I always try to remind myself of the context behind what it is that why I'm seeking validation for something. So, usually if I get into a space where something at school, for example, is making me feel bad, I know where that's coming from. I know it's because when I got my diagnosis that year, I spent the whole year being told I should not be where I was, and I was a waste of space, more or less, right, academically, because I couldn't function. I know where it's coming from, and I know that it will pass, and I remind myself of those things. And maybe like a sort of semi-piggyback off of Xannie, I also remind myself that like I'm neurodivergent AF. My mind works differently. There are lots of things that I come into contact with on a regular basis that just clash with me, and it doesn't automatically mean that I am the problem. And sometimes it also means that other people are not validating me, maybe because they simply don't see the world through those eyes. And they can't. It doesn't mean that they think that I'm messed up and what I see is wrong. It's just they don't see it that way. And that's something that I'm becoming more and more and more comfortable with, and reminding myself of more frequently as the weeks go on.
Thank you everyone so much for watching. We hope you got a nugget of wisdom to take with you on this journey. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you do not miss a single episode. And next week we'll have a brand new episode topic for you. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye. The end.